and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 471, and today's date is September 19th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Preparing for Wars on Lies to Cover Up the Economic Collapse. Now, we understand that Europe is completely falling apart, and it is spreading right now, and we're getting real economic indicators to let us know that things aren't going as well as Europe and the United States want us to believe. We see now that U.S. car maker will halt assembly of its Fiesta hatchback in Germany. This is its main European plant, a total of 11 days in October and November, citing lower demand in the second half of this year. Demand fell in Germany, France, and Italy, three of the region's top four markets. Ford said it will apply for subsidies under the German government's Kurzarbeit. This is a short work program affecting about 4,000 workers. Basically what this is the government compensates part of the wage of an employee when his employer needs to reduce wages and working times in periods of economic distress. Basically, it's like a stimulus package for the workers, and the government helps out the corporation, and Germany did this back in 2008, 2009 during this recession, and it seems like they're doing it once again. Now, it seems Microsoft has laid off an additional 2,100 people, and we can see that layoffs are continually happening. They're nonstop, and we're getting information that Caterpillar right now has posted 21 consecutive months of declines. It has beat the record of the 2008-2009 recession. That was 19 months in a row. We are now 21 consecutive months of declining global retail sales. Sales have dropped to 11% in July and 8% most recently. And we can see right now this is not getting better at all. So what are we seeing? We're seeing the housing market falling. We're seeing Caterpillar completely imploding on itself. We see retail sales completely falling, and of course they're using the illusionated numbers where they push the auto sales into retail and they say, hey, look, retail's up. But when you take that out, actual retail numbers are completely falling, and we can see it by all the stores that are closing. I mean, Radio Shack and Sears are out there saying, listen, if they don't have a good Christmas season, that's it. You can kiss them goodbye, and I'm sure JCPenney is right behind them. And, of course, we know we're not going to see a good Christmas season. Many of the people who are getting laid off are having a very tough time finding work. If they do find work, it's for low-paying jobs. People are not going to spend as much as they used to. I mean, last Christmas, I walked around the neighborhood. The garbage that was out there, I saw less garbage with boxes and wrapping paper than I have ever seen before in my life. So that means people are saying, you know what, instead of 10 gifts, maybe we'll buy 2 gifts because that's all we can do this year. And I don't think these stores are going to be able to make it through the Christmas season. Look what happened last Christmas season, and for some reason the unemployment numbers were higher. And if we go back even a year before that, the unemployment numbers were higher, but the Christmas season was better. So as the unemployment number goes down, people are spending less. It makes no sense whatsoever because we understand these numbers are manipulated, and they count those people who dropped off, who haven't had an interview in 4 weeks. They're no longer looking for work, and they really don't want work, which is absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of people in the retail market who don't have the hours or do not reach a certain amount, they cannot apply for unemployment. So they are not counted whatsoever. Now, each state has its own requirements, but on average, they're pretty much the same. And this is why when we see stores closing, all these part-time people, they can't even apply for unemployment unless they have a certain number of hours and they make a certain number of dollars. Now, the U.S. leading indicator to let everyone know the economy is doing well or not only rose by 0.2%, way below what they expected. And we can see right now that this does not look good. Now, they're blaming this on the slower than expected pace of growth last month from applications for housing permits. Now, like I said, we have come out of these summer months. Housing is imploding. Housing permits, housing starts, mortgage applications, refinancing applications. The only thing that looks positive is home builders crossing their fingers, hoping that the housing market comes back. And again, just take a look around the country. Go on to Zillow. Go on to Realtor.com. It's a lot easier on Zillow. You can see the homes in different areas, and you can see how long they've been on the market, and you can see they're starting to lower their prices. This is exactly what we've seen in 2007 going into 2008, and it just got worse. It never got better, and we're seeing the same exact thing happen now. People are not understanding what is going on. They don't understand why the traffic is drying up, and we can see that housing is completely falling apart. The leading indicator of economic activity is declining, and pretty much we can see right now that we are heading into a time period where things are going to start getting a lot worse, especially once we get past this fall into winter and Christmas season. What are they going to use as an excuse? Well, by then, I'm sure we'll have some type of special event to cover this entire thing up. Now, we understand a lot of corporations, manufacturing, have been leaving the United States, and they've been going to other countries that have reduced taxes, that give them tax breaks, which makes it easier for them to operate, which makes it easier for them to hire employees. And here in the United States, we see the government is adding on taxes, adding on more regulations, making it much more difficult for companies to stay here in the United States. And we heard about Burger King doing this inversion. This is what they're calling it right now. And we can see, instead of lowering the tax rate, giving incentives in the country to bring back the companies into the United States, what does our government officials do? Well, if you're going to leave the country and you're going to go to another place and reincorporate in that other country, we're going to give you an exit tax. That's not going to solve the situation. So you're penalizing the company to leave. And of course, if they're going to another country and the tax rate is much, much lower, less regulations, they're going to calculate it out and say, okay, we'll make that up in 6 months. This is still what we're going to do. But our government officials don't even think like, okay, let's put a penalty on those people who are leaving. They think this is going to work. This is going to keep companies here or bring more business into the United States. No, this is going to have the opposite effect. Whenever you tell businesses or people, we're going to do something to you to keep you here, what do people or companies usually do? They usually do what they want to do in their best interest, and none of this ever works. And this is a solution that will not help in the long run. Yeah, they'll bring in a couple of funds, but once all the companies are gone, this exit tax is absolutely meaningless. Instead, why don't they put their heads together and say, listen, why don't we cut taxes? Why don't we cut some of these regulations? Why don't we put forth incentives to bring companies back? But you know what? They don't want to do that. They're not for the people. They're not for making this economy better. They're doing whatever they can to keep their position in government, to keep making money for themselves and for the bankers. They could care less about the people and the country, and it's totally obvious. Now, the Fed is out there, and they're giving a couple warning signs that things might be not going as well as everyone thinks they're going. Fisher says he sees signs of excess in financial markets. Yeah, you mean like the bubble in the stock market? Yes, we see that. Fisher says he wants to see first rate move in spring of 2015. They're continually saying this, that they want this to happen. Fisher says French economy is a disaster. He says uber weak now. And we can see right now that it's not just France, it's Spain, it's Italy, it's Portugal, it's spreading to Germany, it's spreading to the UK, it's moving to Canada and Australia. They're starting to manipulate their numbers. They don't want people to realize what's going on. This is why they're pushing for war so hard. Now, they tried all different things to bring in revenue to the government, like this exit tax for companies who want to leave the country. We also see they used Obamacare. This was tax-ridden. It was just everything about Obamacare was just about taxes. It had nothing to do about giving the people health insurance, keeping them healthy, giving them affordable health, even though that's what it's called. It's actually the opposite. Whatever they put a title on or whatever they say, it is always the opposite of what they're talking about. And what we're seeing is Obamacare is not doing what they wanted it to do, and it's actually going to be doing worse, because what's happening is there is vague language within Obamacare which will result in nearly about 2 million Americans being unable to afford health insurance, according to a new report by the American Action Forum. The so-called family glitch occurs when an individual is offered health insurance through their employer, but the plan is not extended to the rest of their family. Due to the Internal Revenue Service interpretation of the law, other immediate family members are not eligible to receive subsidies for insurance, even if their income is below the federal poverty level. The AAF has estimated about 1.93 million Americans will be affected by the glitch, making it practically impossible for them to obtain affordable health care coverage. Now, the question we have to ask, we have to go right to the beginning. Why didn't our government officials read this? And why is the IRS involved in health insurance at all? Well, we know why, because the whole thing is one big tax grab. That is it. Why do you think they exempted all the government officials from having the health care? Why didn't our government officials sit in front of the TV networks, the news networks, broadcast it across the country when it first came out and show everyone how easy, how great, and why they wanted it? But if the government officials don't want it, why should the American people want it? No, they wanted to keep their great health insurance, and they figured this would be good enough for the people. But guess what? People are realizing what it is. People are realizing the premiums are high. People are realizing, wait a minute, there's taxes all intertwined in this. This is ridiculous, and it's making it harder and harder for people, and it seems now that people are less interested in Obamacare than they have ever been. They're saying it is a disaster. 41% of the people believe in Obamacare. 59% say, you know what, it's a waste of time. And of course, the 41% most likely are those people who are getting subsidies where the government is paying for most of the health insurance. I'm sure the illegals coming over really love it, because now they get health insurance and the government pays for most of it. And we can see right now this is not really for the people. This is for the government. It's to bring revenue into the insurance companies. It's to bring revenue into the government, and it is now falling apart. It is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it was never intended to give health insurance to everyone equally, to make it so everyone gets healthy. It was only intended to bring in taxes, and this is why they had to link it up to IRS. Now, it looks like the Catalonians are looking to do the same thing that Scotland was attempting to do, break away from the UK. Catalonia wants to break away from Spain, and it looks like they might have some type of referendum in November 9th. And of course, Madrid is saying that no, this is completely unconstitutional. You can't do this, but we'll have to see what happens when that occurs. Now, it looks like Russia is out there, and they are saying that, you know, we looked at the election that Scotland had, and it seems like it didn't follow international principles. Basically, it was just people coming in. There was no oversight. There was nothing. People were just marking things, passing along. And they're seeing that, you know, all the other countries follow a certain standard, and it seemed like this wasn't followed at all, but it was following a UK type of standard. And we're starting to see that the voting might have been kind of fixed, because we're seeing a lot of videos out there, and I posted them on the People and also on the X22Report.com site. You can see them. People commented, and it shows videos of the people who are handling the votes swapping the yes and no papers out. There's a whole pile of no votes on a table, and when you zoom in on it, the boxes are checked yes, and they are on the no table. So we can see right there something seemed to be a little off, where there could have been manipulation to get that no vote, because the bankers do not want Scotland to break away from the UK. It would cause so many different problems. They did not want this to happen at all. Now, as soon as the vote was in, it looks like Salmond resigned after losing the Scottish independent referendum. He said his time is up, and he is now out of the picture. Okay, now, we understand Ebola is pretty much getting worse, and we see a lot of warnings out there from the CDC where 2 million, 3 million people can be infected, and we see that there are certain countries that are coming in to help in West Africa. Of course, the United States is one of them. They're sending in 3,000 military soldiers into the area, plus other equipment. But what we're seeing is that all these countries are doing things individually. Now, this is a huge, huge outbreak of Ebola, and it's going to affect the entire world. Wouldn't it make sense for Russia, the United States, and China and all the other countries to get together under the UN and say we need to have some type of international help in this situation to pretty much clamp this down so it doesn't spread? And we see that each country is doing something a little different and trying to help. Of course, the United States is in there bringing in soldiers, and I still do believe that Ebola there was manufactured by the United States and by other countries to contain the West African countries and to allow the United States to infiltrate these countries with soldiers, have the bankers come in to bail them out, to decimate the economy. And this is exactly the path that we're taking. But a lot of the countries are still trying to help. They're not sending in soldiers. They're sending in other things, like Russia is sending in Ebola protection kits to Guinea. And we see Russia is going to provide food aid to all the West African countries. They're also sending in teams of anti-epidemic teams, which includes virologists, bacteriologists, and others to help out with this situation. We see China is sending in medical staff. We see Cuba is sending in medical staff. And we see the United States sending in some medical personnel, but mostly soldiers, which is very interesting. But again, if this is a worldwide type of epidemic that can go crazy here, where they're saying there could be 2 to 3 million people, this has to be done on a global effort to stop this. And I'm just curious why this isn't happening at this time. Now, it looks like a Liberian ship carrying some type of sickness pretty much came to America, and what we're seeing here is that the people on the ship are reported to have malaria. Now, malaria you get when an insect bites you and it transfers the virus into you, and people get it. It is not passed from person to person. You cannot get it through the air. You cannot get it by touching someone. If you have a blood transfusion, you can get it. If someone's bleeding and you have it in an open cut, you can get it. But otherwise, you can't get it. But what's very interesting about this is the CDC is saying that everything is perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. We have everything under control. It's only malaria. But why are so many people on the ship infected with malaria? Are you saying that everyone got bitten by the same insect, or there were just insects all over the place and everyone got bitten and everyone has malaria? So it seems to me there might be a little bit of a cover-up of what is going on in the ship. And of course, the ship is from Liberia, and they visited other areas in Africa, the Congo. So we don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems very interesting that they said it was malaria. And normally, yeah, you could see one person having it, but the entire ship, something seems very, very odd. Now, in Nigeria, we understand the United States have been trying to get into Nigeria using Boko Haram as this terrorist group. They created it out of thin air. And this is part of the United States playbook. They put terror into each one of these countries, hoping that these countries call the United States in and they can bring their military in. And Nigeria has said, absolutely not, we do not want you in here. We will handle this ourselves. And of course, as we know, they've been using the case where Boko Haram kidnapped 100 girls, kidnapped 100 boys, blew up a college, is part of the Islamic State, is capturing all these different territories. But it looks like Nigerian officials have reported capturing one of the top commanders of Boko Haram, and the UK is reporting that Boko Haram's strategy is really starting to look like the Islamic State strategy. It looks like they're combining forces, spreading out all over Nigeria, and this might turn into an international terrorist group, and this is exactly what they want because, as you know, the United States has a bill floating around saying that the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, or other terrorist groups, wherever they are, the United States can go after them, and we can see they are completely setting this up so they can get into Nigeria. Now, the United States has already put troops in Chad, which borders Nigeria, hoping they can just move them right in. And we can see right now Nigeria is one of those countries that has a huge amount of oil, natural gas discovery. We also know that China is in there. Senegal, Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Congo, all had huge, huge discoveries. And it seems like these are the countries that have the Ebola virus. Now, of course, like I said before, there is a doctor in Liberia saying this is completely manufactured. They were giving the people in these countries vaccines, and the doctor there is saying that, yeah, I think this is what actually created the Ebola epidemic in Liberia. Now, out in Afghanistan, it seems that the two candidates decided to have a unity government where they're both going to rule, and this was done by the United States, where they made the suggestion, why don't you just both rule? Because, again, we have to remember, the United States wants Afghanistan to sign the bilateral security agreement so they can keep the troops in Afghanistan. And we'll have to see and watch this very, very carefully to see exactly when this is signed. And then you'll see a huge difference in the number of troops that are going to be staying in Afghanistan compared to the amount of troops that are going to be leaving. And I think they're going to be ramping up the number of troops once this is signed. Now, it looks like South Korea and the U.S. is planning a 10-day military exercise. South Korea and the United States have launched a 10-day joint military exercise as part of their annual drill, despite the condemnation from North Korea. They're saying, oh, this is absolutely ridiculous. And, of course, they're doing this to provoke North Korea into doing something. The Joint Air Assault Military Drills kicked off at Camp Casey, a U.S. Army base in South Korea, on Thursday. These exercises are aimed at training over 200 soldiers for combat readiness. The 10-day air assault drills are aimed at boosting support for Seoul and deterring possible aggression from North Korea. Now, as soon as we started these drills, what happened? Well, South Korea had to fire on a patrol ship because it was getting very, very close to the maritime border. And, of course, they were hoping that North Korea was going to return fire or do something to say, look, they did something. And this is all about provoking. There was absolutely no reason to fire on the patrol boat, but of course they are trying to provoke, and this is what they're doing in the Pacific. This is what they're doing in Eastern Europe with Russia, and the United States central bankers are trying to get the war started in the Middle East, and they're pushing very, very hard. Now, the UN officials are still saying that they are trying to get to the MH17 crash site, and they're saying it is very, very problematic because there's still gunfire, there's still shelling in this area, and it's very difficult to get into this area. Now, Russia is saying that, you know what, this whole investigation is taking a very long time, so they're proposing something. What are they proposing? Well, Russia suggests United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon look at possibility of appointing a UN Special Envoy for MH17 crash probe and sending a special mission to the crash site. And they want them to collaborate with the OSCE. Now, of course, as we can see, the Dutch have issued their preliminary report, and now we're finding out that the final investigation report on Malaysian Airlines will not be ready until next summer. So they are really dragging their feet on this, and they're hoping that this will just completely go away. And if you notice in the corporate media, you hear nothing about this anymore. It completely disappeared. And before, what were we hearing? Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it, yes, 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 and now we hear nothing. It's like the United States the government doesn't even care about it anymore, because they really don't, because they know who did it. It was them, it was Kiev, all planned together to blame it on Russia, and this is why they don't care right now. Now it looks like France could deliver these Mistral ships to Russia. Looks like as the ceasefire is holding, and they're saying as long as it holds and the political process goes ahead, France will deliver the ships to Russia. Now it looks like Russia is looking at measures to make sure the internet is not cut off in regards to when there's war or if there's any other type of thing happening. The Russian authorities are not planning to cut the country off the World Wide Web, but on the contrary are looking at a measure in case the West tries to block internet access for Russia. They want alternative routes so internet can stay up. So if they block one, it automatically switches to the other. They're going to keep this secret so no one pretty much knows about it. And they want to make sure the internet stays up. And again, as we know, China, Russia, the other BRIC nations, they are completely separating and pretty much going internal. So when the war starts, they don't have to depend on the West for pretty much anything. And we can see right now they're very worried about the internet going down, and they're taking precautions, of course. Just like China is building their own operating system to put on all their computers. They don't want to be dependent on the West because they know the operating systems like Microsoft, Apple, they all have backdoors, and the United States, NSA, are spying on all the different countries, and they don't want to be dependent on this. They don't want to be spied on, and this is why they're separating themselves from all of this. And they know what's coming up. They understand what the central bankers are doing. They see what's going on. They realize that they're trying to provoke a war. And every single time, if you really noticed, Russia has been calming the situation down. If Russia truly wanted a war, they could have gone forth so many different times, and we could have been in war already. But each time, they're looking for a peace deal, a peace deal, a peace deal. If they really wanted to do it, they could have done it back in August 2013. They could have done it with Ukraine. There was no reason to wait. If China really wanted to do it, they would have just fired on an airplane, a ship out in the Pacific to really push us. But again, as we know, they really don't have to stop war. If they really wanted to destroy the economy of the United States, they're holding treasury bonds. They're holding dollars in reserves. All they have to do is say, you know what? Here are the treasury bonds back. We don't want them anymore. We're getting rid of our dollar reserves. And guess what? The economy would come tumbling down, so there wouldn't even be a reason to start a war. Now, it looks like there's a little bit of confusion with the military and Obama. Now, yesterday I reported that Obama is going to personally control Syria strikes. The U.S. military will be required to obtain the personal sign-off of President Barack Obama for its strikes in Syria. Now, Chuck Hagel is out there and saying, no, this is completely false. Obama is not going to direct the strikes in Syria. The military is going to direct the strikes. And he's saying that the recent Wall Street Journal report is completely false, and he doesn't understand why this is coming out. And he went on to say that CENTCOM commander has full authority to conduct air campaign inside Syria without Obama's approval. So we're seeing two different things happening here. Obama, who is telling everyone that he has control. The military saying that, no, we have control. It seems like they're not communicating, and it seems like they're not getting along with each other, and maybe this is why Obama was looking at a retired general who's a civilian now to take control of the operations that is not in military command structure. And we can see right now that something is definitely going on inside the government structure at this time. Now it looks like the Free Syrian Army is out there, and they are looking for support from Israel. They want them to help shoot down Syrian aircraft to help its own forces win the day against Assad. They're saying that Israel could down any plane above the area and no one would blame it. Of course, as we know, Israel just flies into Syria and bombs different missile sites, different parts of the bases without having any evidence whatsoever. Syria really doesn't do anything, but really this is a breach of international law. They flew into a sovereign country and attacked it. If this happened to any other country, they would be going to war. But what we can see right now is Israel continually does this. The Free Syrian Army wants Israel to back them up. We understand that the Golan Heights, the UN peacekeepers were moved out. The Free Syrian Army took control of the UN military assets there. And we can see right now, this looks like they're setting up for an invasion from the south into Syria when the time comes. Now, a couple days ago, the corporate media and the government officials were out there saying that the Islamic State was hiding because of the reports that the United States was going to bomb them, and they went to underground bunkers to hide so they can't find them. And the Free Syrian Army was out there saying, yes, this is what they've been doing. But now there's other reports coming in that this isn't exactly true. The reason why we're not seeing the Islamic State on the streets anymore is because the Syrian Air Force came in, raided the positions, and left hundreds of dead and wounded all over the place, and that cleared the streets. It wasn't because they were hiding because they were fearful of the United States coming. It was because Syria bombed them and pretty much decimated the Islamic State or the Free Syrian Army in this area. And this is why the Free Syrian Army, and I call them one and the same because really, they're really the same group. The Free Syrian Army and the Islamic State, they were all part of the same group. And you know what? It's all under the same umbrella, controlled by the United States, Israel, UK. And this is why the Free Syrian Army, they're the ones who came out and gave this report, because everyone is, it's all propaganda that's being pushed out there. Now, what's very interesting is that we're hearing the reports that, yes, Syria has kept significant chemical arsenal, and now Israel intelligence believes Syria has retained weapons that are combat ready. A senior Israel official said that, of course, cannot be named, said that Syria has kept some missiles, warheads, airdrop bombs, and rocket-propelled grenades primed with toxins like sarin. There is, to my mind, still in the hands of Syria significant residual capabilities that could be used in certain circumstances and could be potentially very serious, the official said. I haven't seen any information that the Islamic State have received them, but I would not be surprised if they are interested in getting them and Syria supplying it to them. So they are continually building this propaganda up that Syria still has chemical weapons, that they might be handing them off to the Islamic State. But the one thing they continually leave out of all these reports is this. And we know in the corporate media are saying that, watchdogs have reported that Syria has reported that they still have chemical weapons in certain parts of Syria. The part they left out is where the chemical weapons are. They're not in the part where Assad controls. It's where the rebels, the Free Syrian Army, they control that area, and that's where the chemical weapons are. And Assad said, yes, we do have chemical weapons, but they're over there, and we can't get to them, and the UN can't get to them. The Free Syrian Army, the Islamic State, control that area, and they left that out of the report. And of course, it's running rampant all over the corporate media that, yes, Assad still has chemical weapons. We just found out that he still has plants. He didn't turn them over. Well, he can't. And this is the whole thing, because they're trying to link this entire thing up, and they're continually doing it. They're leaving information out. They're using propaganda. Just like the MH17 shoot-down, it was all propaganda. Just like the false flag event with Assad back in 2013, where they said that he used chemical weapons and it turned out to be the rebels. And now we're finding out these chemical weapons are in the hands of the rebels. Amazing. Okay, now, to keep the fear going, we understand that government officials, corporate media, they're out there. We saw in Australia where they stopped this live beheading. And of course, there's also another person in New York where he's part of the Islamic State. Now, of course, these were all set up. They find people who are very easily convinced to do something, and they are led down a certain path and they're convinced to do something, and this whole thing is a complete setup. These are dupes. That's what they do. And what we're seeing right now is that really the U.S. intelligence leaders, they're unclear on exact danger posed by the Islamic State. They have no intelligence information whatsoever. They're just making it up. You know why? Because the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations created this group. They don't know if there's 10,000. Sometimes they say there's 20,000 Islamic State fighters on the ground. Maybe there's 31,000 on the ground. They have no clue. And when you really look at it, what's so great about the NSA, all the intelligence, all the satellite images we have? They're worthless if they can't figure out how many they have. It makes no sense. And they try to confuse everyone saying that, oh, they hide, they do this. No, that's ridiculous. It's almost like Iraq with weapons of mass destruction holding up this pink powder and convincing the American people that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and of course he never did. It's a lie. This is why they can never tell you the truth, because if they told you the truth, they couldn't get you to go to war. And this is why when you see all these reports coming in, they're all mixed up, they don't make sense. It's because they're lying, and they have to cover that lie with another lie. It's ongoing. Now they're pushing out more propaganda about the Islamic State. They're saying that the Islamic State is calling for radicalized lone wolves in the United States to go to their homes of the U.S. soldiers and slaughter military personnel. Militants in Syria have been using Twitter to encourage Muslims in the West to target soldiers with spontaneous attacks using knives and guns and to kill those soldiers. And they're just continually pushing the propaganda out there. They want you to know that the Islamic State is a crazy bunch of terrorists that will stop at nothing to kill the Americans. And they want everyone to realize that when this huge event happens, they know exactly who it is, they know exactly who did it, and where they have to go. And that is only Syria. That's where they're going. Iraq they're not going to. They're going to Syria. They're not going to any other place except Syria to remove Assad. This is what it is all about. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.